You're listening to Precinct 444, a podcast network from the National Law Enforcement Museum. Today, we're bringing you an episode from Lifeline, offering a holistic wellness approach focused on supporting American law enforcement, promoting resilience, safety, and survivability. Throughout the United States, law enforcement officers place themselves in danger every hour of every day as they respond to priority calls for service, handle crash scenes, and pursue violent criminals fleeing in vehicles. To create greater awareness of the persistent dangers officers face while operating on our nation's roadways, and to promote a stronger culture of safety within all law enforcement agencies in the United States, the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund hosted a one-day summit in July 2022 at the National Law Enforcement Museum. We heard presentations and discussions on the issue of law enforcement traffic-related fatalities and how to make it safer for officers and instill a stronger culture of safety. Experts who are working to improve traffic safety for law enforcement discussed the issues and proposed a set of universal recommendations that will be shared with the law enforcement community to improve vehicle and roadside safety. Today, we bring you part one of a look back at the Traffic Safety Summit. We'll hear from Marcia Ferranto, CEO of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund, Troy Anderson, Executive Director of Officer Safety and Wellness for the fund, Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois, Congresswoman Val Demings of Florida, Brian Doherty of the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, and Nick Brule, retired Traffic Safety Branch Lieutenant with the Washington Metropolitan Police Department and Senior Project Manager for the Memorial Fund. Let's now go inside the National Traffic Safety Summit.
I'm Marcia Ferranto. I'm the CEO of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial and Museum, and I welcome you here this morning, all of those live here and all the people that are watching virtually. Thank you for being here with us, and thank you for joining us. I'd like to recognize one of my favorite people in the room, Congresswoman Val Demings is here, and we will be hearing from her in a minute. But we've been following each other around the country this week, so it's good to see you again. It has. So, often we start programs and we recognize sponsors, and it's sort of something that you get through. Well, I want to recognize a sponsor. I don't want to get through it. I want us all to internalize what it means for corporations to be sponsoring law enforcement, especially during the time where it was unpopular. These companies have stuck with law enforcement through and through, and it is very meaningful. And everyone watching and everyone listening needs to understand that these companies are standing behind law enforcement. Today's program is brought to us by Goodyear. And Goodyear has been an incredible partner with us, and they stand behind our traffic safety and wellness. Also, hanging out with us today, we have a couple of other corporate partners. We've got Whelen Engineering in the house. Welcome, gentlemen. We have Starbucks, we have NHTSA, Motorola, Verizon, Frontline, Mission Square Retirement, and then online, DuPont is watching with us today, as is Relentless Defenders and our partner Police Unity Tour. So I would like to really recognize every corporate partner that we have, especially Goodyear. You make this possible. You make it possible today, and it will save lives. So take it back to your company and tell them how much we appreciate it. Let's get started with our program. So today's program is being run by our Executive Director of Officer Safety and Wellness. His name is Troy Anderson. And I want to read to you Troy's bio. I'm not really in favor of reading bios often because I think they get long-winded. But the reason I think that this one is important today, it's important for you to know the caliber of professionalism that we have behind everything we're doing here at the Memorial and the Museum. So allow me to take a minute to read to you about Troy Anderson. This never gets old for me to read about Troy. So Troy Anderson began his career in law enforcement more than 30 years ago as a U.S. Army military police officer and served in combat operations in the Middle East during Operation Desert Storm and Desert Shield. He continued his work in law enforcement later as a correction officer for the state of Connecticut and as a municipal police officer in the state of Massachusetts. Just keeps getting better. Troy served the Connecticut State Police as a sergeant for 26 years, retiring as the Director of Wellness and Resilience. During his career, he served on patrol as a resident state trooper, a detective, international affairs investigator, and was the creator and program manager for STOPS, which represents state troopers offering peer support. And he did that for 10 years. In that position, he managed several law enforcement-related behavioral health programs, including the department's 2 CISM, Critical Incident Stress Management Teams, and peer support program and military program. He was twice the recipients, not once, twice, the recipients of the Connecticut State Police Life-Saving Medal, Outstanding Achievement Medal, 2 Unit Citation Awards, the Commissioner's Sandy Hook Recognition Award, and the Connecticut Wartime Service Medal. Following the tragic and unthinkable school shooting at the Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut on December 14th, 2012, Troy managed the Connecticut State Police CISM teams that were deployed on site and tasked with providing interventions and debriefings for the affected members of the state police, municipal and federal law enforcement partners, first responder staff, support personnel, embedded clinicians, and state senior executives. I'm almost done, but isn't it good? Troy was a recipient of the 2013 International Critical Incident Stress Foundation Co-Founders Award for Excellence in Critical Intervention and/or Disaster Response based on his work with the Sandy Hook Elementary School tragedy. The 2016 Officer Paul Bucknam Memorial Peer Support Award for extraordinary leadership and dedication to mental health and well-being, and was presented extensively on critical incident stress management and peer support across the United States, Canada, and Europe. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the Executive Director of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund's Officer Safety and Wellness Program, Troy Anderson.
I don't even know what to say following that. I want to welcome all of you and genuinely thank you for taking the time out of your schedules to join us both in person and online. I'm going to tell you a little bit about where we are here today on the campus of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial across the street, and then, of course, the museum that we're in today. So I'm going to talk about our 3-pillar approach quickly. I'm going to walk through this because that intro took so long that we may never get through the day. So I'm going to make this as brief as I can. So looking at the memorial across the street, those of you who haven't been there, I would encourage you to go across the street. Those virtually, please come down and spend some time at our memorial. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a place of remembrance, a place of healing, and an opportunity for folks to come together and really have a greater appreciation for the sacrifices that are made in law enforcement across this country. But it's more than just that when you think about the memorial. What we look at, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more today, but it's really the genesis behind what brought us here today, which is we look at the data that comes out of the data that's captured from our line of duty database, the captured data that we use to put together our mid-year and end-of-year officer fatality reports. So that is really what brought us here together. So we have the memorial. We, of course, have the museum, which you're in today, and you're going to get an opportunity at the end of the day to spend a little bit more time walking around. Absolutely phenomenal facility. We're super proud of it. This building tells the story, and so do the people that work here, by the way, a very dedicated group. They tell the story of American law enforcement, and it's told in such a way that it is designed to honor law enforcement, and that's what's being done here today. So I would encourage you, when you get an opportunity, to walk through. The last piece, and that's the piece that I sort of oversee, is the officer safety and wellness piece. We have a number of components that are happening there. But one of the things that we do is work very closely with our partners at NHTSA. And as we work with our partners at NHTSA, we're sort of looking with that solutions-oriented approach. How can we make it safer for those who serve? Because really, that is part of our mission statement, making it safer for those who serve and keeping names off of the wall across the street. So what happened was we looked at that end of year 2021 fatality data that was released in January earlier this year. And as we were looking at it on our team, and as we looked at it as a group here at the Memorial Fund, we looked at those numbers, and some of the numbers that jumped off the page, if you remember earlier this year, were sort of staggering. And one of those things that really seemed to hit us right in the face were the numbers related to traffic fatalities. More specifically, the traffic fatalities was struck by events. So we started to ask the questions, why? Why is this happening? Why is it now? How can we look at that solutions-based approach? Who do we need to bring together? And you are in the room now with the greatest experts that we have. This is an opportunity for us to come together. For some of you, you may have heard some of this before, but I assure you that nobody will leave here who is watching virtually who is not going to learn something new today. This is an opportunity for us to come together to learn new things, new concepts. And you know what happens with change, right? The change starts today, but we know that law enforcement is a change-adverse culture, isn't it? It absolutely is. We don't like change. We like the way things were done yesterday, right? We don't like change. Change confounds before it comforts, but I can assure you that if we don't make changes, especially as it relates to traffic-related fatalities, we're going to have traffic-related fatalities. We need to make changes. And when you see those numbers that are trending in the wrong direction, although we are fortunate to have seen them changing a little bit, but we know there's an ebb and flow to everything that has to do with watching fatality data. We need to get better at what we do. We've got the right people in the room today to make that change. For those of you who are watching back home, let's take this information. Let's implement this information. I know there's policymakers out there and change makers and agency leaders. Let's do what we can to pull this all together and make this exactly what we thought this could be when we were sitting there having a vision about what would this look like, getting the greatest minds in traffic enforcement and law enforcement leadership thinking process together in the same room. What does it look like? Well, it looks like today. So a couple of things. I do want to thank Marcia, our CEO, Marcia Ferranto, for really allowing us to put this together and for hosting this for us, because this was just an idea at one point, but it was an idea that we knew needed to happen. So I thank her for that. I thank our senior program manager, Nick Brule, because he really faced the challenge of putting this together head on and is just working tirelessly. And also always thanking our folks at NHTSA, John Marshall and his team. We couldn't work with a better team. Their support for law enforcement traffic safety is unwavering, and they do so much every day to save lives. So without further ado, I'm going to move on. I know that I have to do some video introductions, which I've never done this before, so this should be different. So it's going to give me great pleasure now to introduce two recorded comments from two U.S. senators that have been instrumental in the advancement of move over laws and roadway safety initiatives. With U.S. Senator Dick Durbin, he's a senior senator from the state of Illinois. Senator Durbin serves as the Senate Majority Whip, the second highest ranking position among Senate Democrats. Senator Durbin has been elected to this leadership post by his Democratic colleagues every 2 years since 2005. Senator Durbin, as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and sits on the Appropriations and Agricultural Committee.
Hi, Senator Durbin here. Pleased to welcome you to the National Law Enforcement Traffic Safety Summit. You know, it's a dangerous situation for first responders who are responding to any issue on the side of the road. Whether it's an interstate highway or a rural two-lane, we need to protect those who protect us. For years, I've been pushing for increased safety measures in cars that protect both passengers and those outside the vehicle. The infrastructure bill that we passed, recently signed by President Biden, included a provision that we call the Protecting Roadside First Responders Act. It mandates advanced driver assistance systems, including automatic braking on all new passenger vehicles and some commercial vehicles. These features include automatic emergency braking, lane departure warnings, dramatically reducing crashes caused by distracted driving. Until now, they've only been included at an additional cost. Another piece of the bill allows existing safety grant funding to be used to fund the deployment of digital alert technology for first responders. This allows first responders to activate an alert that can tell drivers through existing navigation apps when they're nearing a first responder. Every time you respond to a roadside incident, you're putting your life on the line to protect the public. It's about time the federal government uses its power to protect you. Thanks for all you do.
And next, U.S. Senator Tammy Duckworth. She's an Iraq war veteran, a Purple Heart recipient, and a former Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, who is among the first handful of Army women to fly combat missions during Operation Iraqi Freedom. Senator Duckworth served in the reserves for 23 years before retiring at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in 2014. She was elected to the U.S. Senate in 2016 after representing Illinois' 8th Congressional District in the House of Representatives for 2 terms. Senator Duckworth serves on several influential committees that give her an important platform to advocate for Illinois' working families and entrepreneurs. I introduce to you Senator Duckworth.
Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry I couldn't be with you all in person today, but I'm glad I could join you virtually to underscore how important it is that we do everything we can to keep law enforcement officers safe on our nation's roadways. As the ranking member on the Transportation and Safety Subcommittee in the Senate, I've long been a strong advocate for transportation safety across the country, and I understand how critical these issues are. In just the last 13 years, more than 120 law enforcement officers have died after being struck by vehicles while stopped along highways, including 3 Illinois state troopers killed in just a single year, Troopers Ellis, Jones Story, and Lambert. My heart goes out to the families and loved ones of every officer killed in a roadside stop, and I know that we have a lot of work to do to prevent future roadside tragedies. That's why in 2019, I was proud to join Congresswoman Bustos and Senators Durbin and Fisher in calling on the federal government to study the effectiveness of move-over laws. As you know, these laws are designed to protect emergency responders, workers, and others who are stopped on the side of the road by requiring motorists to shift lanes or just simply to slow down. But sadly, states were reporting numerous incidents of drivers failing to move over and crashing into emergency responders and others. The federal study we requested found several challenges states face in implementing these laws and suggests ways that the federal government can help raise awareness of them, which I'm going to keep working to implement. So last year, I joined Senator Durbin in introducing a bill to do just that. I'm proud that the bill, Protecting Roadside First Responders Act, is now law as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, and that the Biden administration included it in a national roadway safety strategy and will invest in innovative life-saving technologies that reduce risk and better protects first responders. As each of your participants in this summit, please know that I've got your back, and I look forward to hearing more about the discussions you have and any solutions or strategies devised to improve roadway safety for law enforcement. Thank you again for letting me join you today.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. In 2020, like many organizations, we had to pivot when our Destination Zero conference for officer safety and wellness shifted from an in-person to a virtual event. With many moving parts and a mission to get critical knowledge out to the field, the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company stepped in with support. In 2021, Goodyear returned to us once again and provided the financial and content support that we needed to bring that conference to the national law enforcement audience once again. Now in 2022, the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company's vision for officer safety and its commitment to supporting our mission has grown, and we're incredibly grateful for their support now as our lead sponsor of vehicle and roadside safety. As our partner in this mission, we are blessed with the engagement of their leadership team who serve on our advisory boards and provide important thought leadership to our efforts to reduce law enforcement traffic-related fatalities. It gives me great pleasure now to introduce one of those standout thought leaders, Brian Doherty, Channel Manager for Government Sales at the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company.
So this is my first time in the museum. I got a chance to walk around a little bit beforehand, and wow, it was pretty impressive. Was down for the vigil back in May for the candlelight vigil, and we thought we would tour the museum then, but due to some plane delays, we made it too late. The museum had already closed, so we did get a chance to go across the street and check out the wall, and then go to the vigil at night. And it it was such an honor, and it was so moving to be there for that event. I don't have words really to express that. This is my first time being at one of these events also, so bear with me a little bit. Up to about a week ago, I was naively thinking I was going to be sitting out in the back there with some of you, and then I got the opportunity to be able to speak. And at first, I'll be honest, it was terrifying. But then I kind of realized that the honor that it is to do this. So I kind of decided to step up and fulfill that. Same thing that Goodyear. So we've sponsored or supported law enforcement for many years. It didn't just start with this sponsorship. We have a profound appreciation for the service and sacrifices of law enforcement officers. We strive to provide products that will help others that will help officers finish their day safely. When the opportunity to partner with the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund to improve vehicle and roadside safety for our nation's law enforcement officers came up, it was something that we took very seriously, and we saw the opportunity to really show how much the officer safety means to us. So it's our sincere hope that together we can help make the roads safer for law enforcement officers on a daily basis. And now I'm honored to introduce Congresswoman Val Deming of Florida's 10th Congressional District. Congresswoman Demings has served the U.S. House of Representatives since 2016. But prior to that, she served for 27 years in law enforcement on the Orlando Police Department. There, she rose through the ranks and became the department's first female police chief, a remarkable accomplishment for a Black female starting in law enforcement in the 1980s. She served for 5 years as chief and oversaw a 40% drop in violent crime. She is an advocate for public safety, all too familiar with the dangers officers face on the roadways. Please welcome Congresswoman Val Demings.
Well, let me say good morning to all of you, and thank you so much for that introduction. See, standing up and talking to your friends, people who are all on one accord with the same goals and purposes isn't so bad after all. It is my honor, my privilege to join you today. I want to start off first by thanking Marcia and Troy and the whole team, the entire team here at the National Law Enforcement Memorial and Museum for all that you do to tell the stories of America's law enforcement officers, to tell their stories. People who go to work every day, never knowing if they are going to make it back home to their families. We know we stand here at this wonderful facility because many didn't make it back home. And so, Marcia, and to your team, we thank you for telling the story of America's law enforcement officers. I stand before you this morning as a former police officer who had the privilege of going through the ranks to become Orlando's 36th chief of police. I spent 27 years at OPD. It was a place that I loved, a profession that I loved. I still do, by the way, a place where I feel I grew up. Some of you, I know there are some sheriffs in the room who know that my husband also is a former law enforcement officer, started out at OPD in 1981 and worked his way up to become Orlando's 34th chief of police. So yeah, we have an interesting family. But we have 3 sons, and 2 of our sons are firefighters. Now, okay, and let me just say, when they were firefighters, right? So I'm like, okay, guys, we're proud of you. We're proud of you, right? But what happened to, you've watched your parents every day put on the uniform and put on the gun belt and go out to keep America safe. And they said, well, we don't want to get shot at. I said, okay, well, let me just say this part. Running into burning buildings. Let's think about that for a minute. But we have a family that is committed and dedicated to public safety. When I think about serving in the U.S. House of Representatives, I never forget on some of those challenging days that the citizens of Orlando, when I was elected, they sent their police chief to work for them and their interest in Congress. What an honor. You know what? After being elected, I was sworn in on my mother's birthday on January 3rd of 2017. And I always wondered, what would my first speech be about on the floor of the House of Representatives? This person who grew up in Florida, the daughter of a maid and a janitor who had the honor of serving as police chief and now elected to the House of Representatives. I wondered, what would that first speech be about? Would it be about infrastructure? Would it be about education? Would it be about our economy and keeping our economy on track? Would it be about our national security? Well, I can tell you this morning, I shall never forget my first speech on the House floor. It was on January 9th of 2017. It was National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. And Lieutenant Deborah Clayton of the Orlando Police Department was shot and killed in the line of duty on that day while trying to apprehend a man who had shot and killed his pregnant girlfriend. See, when I was appointed chief, Deborah was my first promotion. I promoted her to sergeant. She was my first promotion as the chief of police. Deborah Clayton was a good person, and Deborah was a good police officer. But guess what? On that same day, if that tragedy wasn't enough for us to deal with, we lost another officer from our community. Orange County Deputy First Class Norman Lewis, known to his friends as Big Norm. Norm was killed during the manhunt for Lieutenant Clayton's killer. Deputy Lewis was a motorman, and he was killed in a crash, just like 242 other law enforcement officers from 2017 to 2021. See, yeah, they had tough jobs. They sometimes seemed superhuman, as America's law enforcement officers always do. But Big Norm was known for his kindness. Once, after he issued a traffic citation, the person he had stopped wrote a letter to his supervisor. Now, y'all are going to be shocked at this, because most people who get, the sheriff gets the letter from somebody who was stopped in a traffic stop, they're not commending the officer. But for Norm, this is what the person said, and I quote, "I am poor in my wallet when we met, but I am richer for the experience of someone who truly exemplifies a good cop. As you all know, when a law enforcement officer goes down to rise no more, it's a terrible, horrible, painful loss to the community, to the police departments where they serve, and to the nation. I'm reminded of a poem that says, "Today, a law enforcement officer died, and a part of America died." Last year, 58 officers were killed in traffic-related incidents, nearly as many as the 61 who were shot. We focus a lot on gun violence, and we should. There is not one day in the House of Representatives that I don't think about how we can reduce gun violence, not just for the people in the communities that we serve, but for our brothers and our sisters in blue. 11 of those 58 officers were struck by vehicles. No death, none are acceptable. And we, to the experts in this room, to every police executive, to every member of the community, we must do everything within our power to protect those who protect us. Every day, you all know, our officers go to work. Every day that they hit the street, their lives are in danger. And the job of law enforcement executives, I was one, is to make sure that we give our officers the training. We train today, we win tomorrow. We must give them the tools and the policies necessary to enhance, improve officer safety. Last year, Troy, you mentioned it a bit, at the Destination Zero Officer Safety and Wellness Conference, Harris County Lieutenant James Preston explained how his agency achieved an 89% decrease in crashes on priority 1 calls. And they did it without any major changes in policy. First, they emphasized safety measures like seatbelts and those traffic safety vests. We need to see you. We need to make sure that you are safe. In 2015, an article in the journal Policing found that officers who were not wearing seatbelts were 180% more likely to be seriously injured or killed. Think about the tremendous loss, a loss that we never get over when an officer goes down, never to rise again. With training and reputation and practice, remember that muscle memory. We want it to be a mindset for our officers. We can make sure that officers feel confident that they can fully utilize their safety equipment without limiting their mobility in the event of a threat. We're always concerned about that. I remember as a police officer pulling up to all the calls have the potential to be dangerous, but we're trying to get out of that seatbelt because we want to go in and be able to move in a safe manner. Harris County created a driving simulator. They ramped up internal training for high-risk stops. They emphasized data, transparency, and accountability. Remember, it's about safety, our number one priority. It's about safety, our number one priority, and we know we owe that to America's law enforcement officers. Overall, in Harris County, they brought down at-fault line of duty crashes by 94% in just 2 years. During my law enforcement career, I served as the commander of the Special Operations Division, the motors, traffic enforcement, Marine, and Mounted Patrol or K-9 unit. and traffic homicide. How well I know that there is a lot going on in the day of a police officer's, police radios, mobile computers, cell phones, navigation systems, proactive patrols, always looking for that which is out of order, that which is unusual, that which does not belong there. And that's what we want them to do, those distractions. But safety, ladies and gentlemen, safety must always be first. It must be a mindset. Now we know enhanced safety measures, equipment, training, these things do cost money. We understand that. So let's explore how Congress can help. Gosh, as a member of Congress, I love saying that this morning, how Congress can help. Every now and then, yeah, we do. This year, I voted for new funding through the National Law Enforcement Roadway Safety Program. You've heard a little bit about that, to help with no-cost training, technical assistance, and resources to local, state, and tribal law enforcement agencies. That funding was signed into law, so I am hoping our agencies can make good use of this new funding. In the next coming weeks, we will vote on bills that will assist smaller police departments. That's critical because we all know smaller departments many times don't have the same resources as larger agencies do to be able to offer this type of training. So I'm hoping that once we pass this legislation in the House, that we can get the Senate to act and pass these bills so that across our great nation, we can take advantage of funding to help keep our officers safe on the road. We're also excited about new funding and the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Senator Duckworth talked about it, that will help us secure digital alert technology. A program in Pennsylvania using this system was able to reduce crashes involving roadside assistance vehicles from 30 in 2018 to 0 in 2020 to 0, according to the Federal Highway Administration and Governor's Highway Safety Association. Our legislation also requires a new study on move-over laws, like the one that we do have in my home state of Florida. And we know these type laws are critical to protecting officer safety during highway stops. So Congress is working on this issue, but of course, we can and we must do more. As a U.S. representative, I've had the honor of joining you for the candlelight vigil during Police Week. I've gone a whole bunch of years, of course, before I was elected to Congress. But since I've been in Congress, I've had the honor of reading the names of the fallen from my home state of Florida. Our police officers take an oath to protect and serve, and they take that oath very seriously. Every day, they put their lives on the line, whether behind the wheel or on the side of the highway. Our job is to work together. You and me, work together, Republicans and Democrats and independents. Let's work together to keep them safe. We owe that to them, and we owe that to our communities. I am grateful to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund and the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial and Museum for convening this first of its kind event as we work to protect the ones who protect us. Thank you to the people in this room. As I heard some of the names being called, it brought back such fond memories of Wayland and Goodyear, Motorola, and others. We've been together for a long, long time. Thank you for supporting the men and women in blue. May God continue to watch over you and watch over America's law enforcement officers. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Demings. Really wonderful remarks. Appreciate it. Let me introduce myself quickly. I'm Nick Brule. You should know my name. It's on all the pieces of paper that I think a lot of you guys got, and at the bottom of the screen where you register and everything. A few housekeeping things while Joe is getting my presentation up. If you can remember to silence your cell phones, that would be great. Safety-wise, we are in a shelter-in-place location, so if we get some real bad weather, we're in the right place. Exits are on both sides. Bathrooms are directly across the exhibit floor. We're on the exhibit floor here. If you see where the Indiana patrol car is, the bathrooms are right over on that side. Lunch. You should have, for those of you who are here, not for those folks who are virtual, you should have a map of locations to grab some lunch. It is beastly hot outside. Nothing I can do about that. That's just Washington summer. Welcome. So what was the other thing I wanted to mention? We have a couple of presentations that might be tough to watch. So there might be some strong language, right? We're all adults. A lot of us are cops. So we may be used to that. But I want to make sure that everybody is cautioned adequately about that potential for some of that foul language or disturbing images.
Thanks to everyone who helped create the Traffic Safety Summit and who offered thoughtful and engaging insight into these critical issues. In part 2 of our continuing look inside the summit, we will hear from experts about steps and strategies to create a safer environment for officers on the road. Thanks as always to Christopher Mitchell, our Manager of Digital Content and Strategy, for producing today's episode. And many thanks to you for listening to this episode of Lifeline, a Precinct 444 podcast from the National Law Enforcement Museum. We hope you enjoyed this episode and will join us next time for part 2 and more content from Lifeline. Please subscribe to Precinct 444 on your favorite podcasting platform to stay connected and to receive our latest content as soon as it drops. And we would love to hear from you. Send in your questions, comments, and feedback to precinct444@nleomf.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Find us online at lawenforcementmuseum.org. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the precinct.